You got to know where this guy at all times. There he is again.
How about 3 in a row?
Going bang! That was cold-blooded.
Another 3. No!
It's Sunday morning, June 12th, and this is High Volume Shooter. We sit 2-2 tied in the NBA Finals, headed back to San Francisco for the pivotal Game 5. It's crazy, though, man. This series, right? It feels like after every game, the series flips as far as momentum and who you favor. And after that Game 4 in Boston, bully Steph, the epic performance, it feels like it's flipped back towards Golden State. Even Vegas's odds suggest that. Now, obviously, they've reclaimed home court. Now they've opened the door for a Game 6 Clay performance. Rob Williams drags that bad knee off the court at the end of Game 4. Smart looking a little worn down. And then you'd imagine, you'd hope there's some sort of FU Draymond performance in one of these next few games. Oh yeah, and then Jordan Poole appears to have found some sort of comfort and confidence in the series, and he did that on the road, right? And so all of a sudden, after Game 3, where, hey, I'll claim it too. You know, at the end of that Game 3, it wasn't so much that we lost Game 3, right? It was the Steph injury. And those of you that have been following me for a while know I'll keep it. I overreact to some of the injuries, or I get pessimistic, right? I'm not usually optimistic when it comes to injuries. And what spooked me so much about the Steph injury was his reaction, how upset he was. I was like, oh man, because, you know, when you're dealing with adrenaline and Steph being as tough as he is when that happened, you know, I don't think you could have just looked at him staying on the court those final minutes and said, oh, well, he's going to be all right. Like, Steph's super tough, and he also understood the optics of not coming out of the game. Until I saw that he was all right, I was worried that he wasn't. And so, yeah, it looked like the Celtics were ready to seize control of this series headed into Game 4. Not so fast. You met an angry chef. And I think we all circled that moment late in the first quarter when he went back down to the other end of the court and started barking at that Celtics crowd. And there's nothing better than that on the road, right? Because it's quiet. It's one thing when you're talking shit and you're at home and the crowd's loud and no one can really hear it, maybe unless you're shoulder to shoulder with somebody. But when you quiet a crowd and then start screaming on them, that was some different shit, right? And that was the moment it was like, oh, okay, if we get this type of energy from Steph, then this series ain't over. And clearly this series ain't over. Now, I've been holding back this take a little bit because I didn't want to jinx it, right? But fuck it, I can't operate that way. I want to talk about it. The Jayson Tatum Kobe tribute stuff, to me, it just gives us a glimpse into Tatum's personality and kind of shows us his lack of identity. I don't think Tatum really knows who he is. And for those of you that haven't really been paying attention to it, it started in the preseason. All of a sudden, these images come out with Tatum in a Lakers jersey. So he had done a photo shoot in a Kobe jersey, full uniform, recreating his famous shots. Okay, fine. Look, I have no problem with him paying homage to an extent. But again, let's go down the list here. It starts with that, right? Then, before Game 1, he sends a text to Kobe. Don't worry, I got you. Fine. That's fine. Don't put it on social media, kid. Don't do that. Now that looks weird. That's weird. Right? Then there's images of him coming out in their practice. And he's got on the exact outfit that Kobe had in his workout for the Celtics, 25 years ago or whenever that was. The Kobe 24 elbow band. And then this one, I didn't even know, like someone had made a meme about it because people are starting to take notice, right? He has his Instagram, is it his avatar or whatever, where it's Kobe laying on the basketball and then Tatum laying on the basketball. Again, I have no problem with these young dudes paying homage. I understand it. Booker, a lot of these guys do it, but that's just too much. It's kind of strange. I think the real irony in it is, let me list off his peers. 5 of Tatum's peers. Luka, Ja, Book, Donovan, and Trey. Out of those 5 players, so again, I feel like those are his closest peers in age and in stardom and rise, right? Out of those 5, who has less of a Mamba mentality than Jayson Tatum? Luka, Ja, Booker, Mitchell, and Trey. None of them, right? Out of his peers, he's the least Kobe-like. So it's just strange, man. It's strange. And, until he figures out who he is and embraces that, I don't think he'll reach his full potential. And I know some people will push back and say, look, he's young, man. He's young. Give him a break. I get it. Cool, right? So is Ja. So is Luka. But when you watch them and hear them talk, you can tell they are who they are. They know who they are, right? There's no facade. It's just people mature at different ages, and some people it's just different personality and character traits. And I think that, again, the Kobe tribute thing is kind of just giving us a glimpse into Tatum perhaps just struggling with his identity as a young man. And I know there's millions of people in that position, but he happens to be, an NBA star, and it's going to be magnified, and people like me are going to dissect it. And the other funny thing is Tatum should probably be molding his game after LeBron, right? Tighten the handle, continue to hit the weight room. He has that big frame that can continue to get bigger and stronger and become more of a point forward. Because again, I'm not seeing that Mamba mentality. And watch him come back and just bite me in the butt on Monday, right? I'm gonna hang 50 at Chase. Shit. Nah, but I ain't gonna live in fear. I'm gonna tell you how I feel. That's why y'all listen. Shout out my guy, Stevie Ray. He brought up a great point too, I think. Like, the perceived gap between Tatum and Wiggins, I think, is way bigger than it actually is. And I think we're seeing that play out. Look, I'm not saying that Wiggins is as good as Tatum. Tatum has much more responsibility offensively, right? But again, the gap isn't as big as people would make it out to be. And I think we're seeing some of that in this final series. Now, Jaylen Brown has been the best Celtic. At the same time, I understand Tatum has allowed him to do that, right? He gets to eat off Tatum being the focus. I think the Tatum-Brown dynamic is how Pippen thought it was with him and Mike, right? Like, meaning they both need each other kind of equally, because as much as Tatum allows Jaylen to eat, I think Jaylen also hides the fact that Tatum gets shook out there sometimes. Anyway, there's 3 more games to play here, and so maybe he can prove me wrong and that Mamba mentality can come out, but some things are innate. You are who you are to an extent. You got to figure that out. I think the elephant in the room for the series right now is, when is Udoka going to blitz Steph? When are they going to start to trap Steph, right? And going into the series, I hypothesized the Celtics would probably have to go small by about game 3. And it kind of looks like they do at this point here, right? It's sitting here 2-2, considering the way Steph's performed, but Udoka seems super reluctant. And, you say, well, why? You do what we do. Is he just being rigid? Is it out of fear of unlocking Draymond in the short roll? I don't think so. I don't think it's that. I think it's more out of concern that Looney and Wiggs would mash them on the glass. Because in the past, that was the obvious recipe. If your team had the right personnel, you go small. You go Smart, White, the Jays, and Grant, and you switch everything, a la Houston Rockets. But Loon's ability to stay on the floor while the other team's small, and Wiggins playing like the pride of Canada, that might end up being a quicker death in this series, the way that this Warriors team is constructed. And then you add the fact that Al is their veteran leader. Not only may it not work, but you're also taking off the floor kind of your leader, right? And it's kind of interesting because both coaches face similar issues. Do you play Draymond less? Do you play Al less? And if and when they finally do decide to blitz and send 2 at Steph, it may be sporadically. Like that's always the way defensively, is to sprinkle it in. Like, in an ideal world as a defense, you're able to be super dynamic, right? Come down into a zone, come down into a trap. Now we're switching everything, right? And keep the offense off guard. The problem with that is when you're constantly changing schemes, you're leaving more room for mistakes. And that's why a lot of that, especially with younger teams, and I don't mean Boston, obviously they're elite, but you stick to one scheme because you just don't want these mistakes. But eventually they're going to start to trap Steph and send two. What I'd like to see from the Warriors when that does happen is be more patient in the initial screen. Typically the Dubs, right, they like to kind of do everything really flowy. And they come down to court together in the drag screens or even the Steph Draymond high pick and roll. They come down together. It's like in sync. It's all flowy. They set the screen as they enter the front court together early in the clock. I think it would make things way tougher for Boston's defense if they did it more like Dallas or Phoenix does, more traditional. Come down, flatten out the defense, and then send the pick up from the paint. And I understand what that may allow is for Boston to do some pre-switching. So they may be able to take Al out of that screen action because it's coming from so far. Someone else will switch out and come up for the screen. But it's also in the same time going to allow Steph time to diagnose and ultimately dissect the defense. You know, reject the screen or just see where it's coming from and give him more space. The flowy high screen action kind of in mid-transition, it gets clustered and it happens so fast, the trap that it's sprung on Steph, I think it makes it harder on him. So that's the point that I would make is I'd bring everybody down flat and then who cares who's coming up in it because they're trapping anyway, but it just gives Steph an advantage to see where it's coming from, angles, time. You could slip out of it and really break it. It leaves for more dynamic opportunities, I think. Another great point made by one of the patrons, Brad 30, talking about Draymond. I pointed out in the last breakdown how he's setting these high screens and then he's just standing there. He's just a spectator. If he doesn't want to get back in the play, he's not expecting to have to. I guess the way Steph was cooking. But Brad said, like, look, Draymond, he's got a screen away from the ball after the initial pick. And he's absolutely right because rolling kind of mucks things up anyway. He's not looking to finish, right? He's just kind of eating up space offensively, and just standing there is absurd, right? That's when you see a lot of the Steph over the head turnovers is when Draymond's just kind of flat-footed after he sends the screen because he probably thinks Steph's pulling, and if Steph doesn't or there's a trap and now, you know, he's got to do something. And so screening away, that's the best option. But in order for that to really be effective, that's going to mean that Clay and Otto, they've got to start to head towards Draymond. Because if you watch Clay and Otto, they'll stand on the weak side and in the corner. They'll just stand. They've got to start to move towards Draymond because I don't think he can get all the way over there to set a screen effectively. They got to move together. You can get some slips and some stuff, some back doors out of that. Now, of course, the other big subject is Draymond's minutes. Like, should he even be playing that much? Looney has had a better playoffs, not series, playoffs than Draymond, if you've been paying attention. And there's been some games where Draymond was tossed or fouled out or in foul trouble. A lot of runs happened when he was on the bench. And I've heard some say, well, this is just a bad matchup for Draymond. You're right. It is. It is. In a vacuum, it is. But here's the problem. You start to look around the league, and there are just more and more bad matchups for Draymond. Draymond benefited from first mover's advantage. He flipped the stigma of the term tweener into hybrid. He was the first small ball center, right? And for those of you that don't know that first mover's term, it's a term they use in business. And more or less, it's a service or product that gains a competitive advantage by being first to the market, right? Draymond was first to the market as the hybrid small ball center. But a lot of the time with first movers, they grow kind of fat and happy. They had this advantage, and so they just kind of rest on it. And so the competition, obviously, what are they going to do? They're going to start to copy you. And then eventually, they improve upon what you've done, right? They make better versions of you. And then all of a sudden, you look around, and you're a lesser version of something that a lot of other people already have. Now, that's an extreme example. I'm being extreme here, right? I'm not. There's not a whole bunch of Draymond-like guys around the league, but more and more, you've got these hybrid, long, athletic bigs that can do multiple things. And I want to be clear. Draymond is a legend. That's set in stone. That's set in stone. He's a legend. Perhaps that's part of the issue right now is he knows it's set in stone. But at the same time, when you talk about the optics of what's been going on here, podcast this and all that, this is a guy that we have seen go his entire career without adding anything to his offensive game. In fact, you could make the argument things have subtracted. And now, all of a sudden, in the last year, we've seen him put all this time, work, and effort into his podcasting career. And look, you guys know, like, we're not asking him to all of a sudden become Luka, right? But here's what you do. When you're a non-shooter, when you're not like a naturally talented scorer, you pick one or two spots on the floor where you can get comfortable and confident from. And then you work on floaters, English, just having an array of flip shots around the basket. I mean, how about a little David West elbow jumper? Couldn't add that? Something, right? But it takes more than just showing up to your shoot around. It takes more than doing the prescribed shooting from the team. It takes dedication. The type of extra hours and dedication Draymond is putting into his media career. Now, I say all this, but I expect him to show up at some point in this series. I do. Because ultimately, what makes Draymond special is his competitiveness and will. He'll find a way to help this team. I think the biggest way that he can do it right now is be the elite disruptor we know him to be defensively. Turn defense into offense. Get us out in transition. And look, he's had his moments. He's made some plays, right? But what stuck out to me is he has allowed the Celtics to turn the corner and finish at the rim. And I don't mean with him on the ball, but as that help defender, his infamous spot where he's able to stunt, help, recover, and kind of blow up the 2-on-1 advantage that the offense has gotten. That's been his calling card, right? But too many times in this series, he's kind of just been flat-footed. He's not making them think. He's kind of just letting them turn the corner. Now, is that in part the Celtics' size and athleticism? He doesn't feel like he can get back and recover. Rob's too big or Tatum's too big to even challenge. Maybe some of that is. But either way, he's got to cause more indecision. He's got to get back to using some deception in that cat and mouse game that we're used to seeing him do. So, again, here we are, best of 3. And I think anybody trying to tell you they're confident either way is foolish, right? Like there's just too many variables, right? And look, I'm not knocking, like if you're a fan and you want to be positive and you're like, yo, the Warriors got this, I know it, like fine. But let's not front and act like this is a steady series. Like we're seeing how people can see how this is going to play out because, again, there's just too many variables. I will say, if the Time Lord, if Rob Williams is going to miss time, because again, he asked out of that game 4 late, I think that really opens things up for Poole and Wiggins in particular, our 2 best slashers, obviously. And it would also allow Draymond, I think, to do what I just said he needs to do more of. Come out of that dunker spot defensively or out of that help spot and be more aggressive. Because I do think he's worried about that lob threat. And so if Rob Williams is going to miss some time again, I think that could really tilt things. At the same time, after I just gave my Tatum ain't him speech, does feel like he's due for a big night offensively, doesn't it? Like we know that he is capable of that. He could have a 40-piece and swing a game. Now, if you've listened to this and you're not part of the Patreon and haven't seen the Game 4 breakdown, you're probably thinking like, Alk, how dare you not do something on Steph and his performance? Listen, the Game 4 breakdown was all about Steph as it rightfully should have been. Win or lose, I think this is going to add to Steph's resume. I do. But if he does do this, if he can pull this off against this team and this defense and the way Draymond's playing, I think it pushes him comfortably into the top 10 all time. We're no longer talking or comparing him with KD or Dame or some of these current stars. he will have entered the top floor of the NBA skyscraper amongst the gods, the Jordans, the Magics, and the Kareems. And it appears like he is very aware of that, and it looks like he's going for it. I feel a lot better about the Warriors' chances after that Game 4. I think we all do. That's not something you don't know. And then if we're going to get this Steph, man, like it's special, man. So, but yeah, if you're checking for the breakdowns, I'll be back with Game 5 on my Patreon Tuesday morning, afternoon. This is High Volume Shooter. I'm out, y'all.